Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Jason's Take On podcast series with myself, Jason Noble, based here in London in the UK, and my partner in crime, Mr. Whitehead, based over in the States. Say a quick hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Excellent. This is the first one that we've done where it's just the two of us for a while. We don't have a guest this week. We've got some more guest episodes lined up. But we want to talk about something that I think both of us feel is something that's really exciting. We're seeing a lot of growth in the industry around this, and it's why you need a chief customer officer in 2021. So we're going to talk about where the need for the roles come from, the rise in this role as a new member of the C-suite, why organizations are doing it, why some are not. I really just dive into it a bit more. And I think it'll be a really interesting conversation because, as I said, over the last couple of years, we have seen a massive growth on this. I'm Jason Noble, as I've said. I'm based in the UK, currently as the Global VP of Customer Success for Vinley. And Jason, I'll let you do a quick intro for yourself.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. I am Jason Whitehead, CEO of Tritons and co-founder of SuccessChain at successchain.net, focusing a lot on customer success and user adoption and really getting people to embrace technology as part of their day-to-day working life. So it's really great fun. Check us out.
Excellent. I know we're going to be talking about SuccessChain in a couple of episodes' time, so keep an eye out for that one. That'll be a really cool episode to do. I'm really excited about that one. Don't forget, guys, you can have a look on Twitter, on our LinkedIn group. Do come back with any comments there. We'd love to hear what you guys think about this new role. And as always, we have a bold challenge question for you. And this one really to give you guys something to think about. The question this time is, what can you do in your organization to forge the need for a strong chief customer officer role in 2021 and beyond? So have a think about that one. Jason, let me push the first question over to you. So what exactly is a chief customer officer?
Yeah, it's so nice to see this role becoming so prominent and coming forth, but it really is that latest member of the C-suite, providing that comprehensive and authoritative view of the customer and really getting the whole corporation and customer strategy at the highest level to really make sure that everyone's focusing on acquiring and retaining the customer, delivering a great experience, and making sure they're doing it in a profitable way, which I think is really key. And before a lot of this happened, I think a lot of times customers were really more of an afterthought, especially back in the world of on-prem before the whole subscription business model was, we have a customer, we'd like to keep them, we want to do a quick sale, but there was less concern about what happened after the sale was complete. And I think the subscription business world coming in has changed a lot of that. So I see, this role really as someone who's spearheading all the customer-facing teams in the business, really driving that focus across the entire organization. What are your thoughts? What else would you add to that?
Well, I think it really, for me, it's got to be a role as well that's really championing that focus on the customer internally, but it's also a message for external businesses, but it's also your external market and customers. But it's championing the focus on the customer to really get the entire organization to focus on the customer success. And this is what we've talked about before. And this is customer success when it's not just a department, but it means actual customer outcomes and delivering those. So this person is all about raising the profile. So it is the whole business that's thinking about this, and customer success is there as a way of working or a business philosophy. And I think it's critical that what this person does is it's different to your CEO, your COO. It's someone that's putting the focus on the customer across the business. I think you can also look at it as a chief collaboration officer. It's not just a chief customer officer. And it's about that. It's the exec who helps break down those internal silos and getting that cross-organization collaboration. I think that's key because it is, for me, it's very much a horizontal role. It's someone that talks to product, talks to sales, but just make sure that everyone's talking about the customer. And I remember a colleague, a friend actually, some time back talked about his role as the chief complaints officer, which, although it's a way of looking at it, perhaps there's too many challenges to focus on outcomes when they're looking at reactive things and just being about complaints. But this really is about that organization-wide collaboration and success, which I think is really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely it is. So, as we always like to ask, sort of set some context here, why are we talking about this now and what's changed? Do we need this role, and how is this different than just the VP of a customer success team?
I think it's a great question. And I think a lot of it depends on your organization, your maturity, and the customer base as well. It's not something that everyone needs today. But I think if you look back a couple of years, so in about 2003, actually say a couple of years, that's almost 20 years ago, which is quite scary. but going back that long, there were fewer than 20 people globally that had the chief customer officer as a title. And this is according to a survey by Gartner.
Mhm.
But then jumping through to kind of the last couple of years, they've seen that more than 35% of organizations now lack the role. So 65% of organizations have now got a chief customer officer, which is really, really exciting. And that trend is growing and growing. I think for me, the role is the ultimate evolution of really your customer success managers or your customer success team. It's someone at the C-suite that's driving customer success as a business philosophy at the executive team.
Mhm.
It's about being more commercial when it comes to our customers and driving growth. I think we're beginning to realize more and more that customer success and customers are our growth engine, and the focus isn't just about churn, but about revenue growth and
Right.
value for the customers. And as we said earlier on, I think it says it's a massive statement, both internally and externally, that we've got someone at the C-suite focused on customer outcomes. That's a huge statement. And I think so, if we look at what's changed and where has this need come from for this, I think we've seen the growth and demand for customer success and the awakening in businesses that our existing customers are super critical to our own success and growth. And that this needs to be beyond just a team. So quite often customer success starts as a CSM, starts as a team, but this is really about that evolution. And
Right.
I think ultimately what it does is it really helps drive that profitable customer behavior. Any other thoughts that you could add, Jace?
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of great stuff there. I think to your point too is the coming up with this creating a customer-centric culture across the organization is so absolutely key, and really getting everyone focused on that. We've done a lot of podcasts here talking around the issues of handoffs and handovers and disconnects between the different departments, and really getting everyone to realize that the customer is going to determine our success, our profitability, and the product alone isn't going to get us there. And having the best product in the world with horrible customer outcomes, horrible customer experience isn't going to get you there. So really, I think bringing that business perspective to it all is pretty key. And I think this also has a big impact on how competitive we're seeing. Our
Yeah.
companies building strong CS teams, are they focusing on delivering outcomes? Because we've talked about this many times. I think if customer success and customer outcomes, that's the new battleground here for competition. It's less about features and functions. It's really about that. And having someone looking across the entire organization who has both the skills and the authority and the role to do that and say, let's break down some silos. Let's get doing this. This is going to be absolutely key. And I think we've learned over the years, especially with CS teams, there's so many that still struggle with internal alignment, whether they're aligning within their CS team, but, with product, with sales, with marketing, really getting that done. We need someone who's going to drive this forward at that executive level. And as you said before, it's about being that collaboration officer. And I think people seeing that left to their own devices, it doesn't happen organically. Organizations don't just suddenly have a customer focused culture. You need to have someone in there championing and driving and reinforcing every step of the way and making sure it's throughout every part of the organization. So I think those are some things that I would throw out there. Hey, Jason, so tell me though, why are some organizations still not seeing the need for a CCO? I mean, you said how far I've come along, but and I think there's also both numbers, but also what is that role within those numbers?
I think that's a really great question. I think the thing is, we're seeing a demand for this, and I think that demand will grow. And do you need the role to be customer focused and customer centric? No, you don't. But I think there are some key things that this role can do to drive that. But I think a lot of organizations are still growing. They're still evolving. They're still doing customer success that for them is working. But for me, it's kind of an evolution and maturing of it. And I think, not everyone sees the need for the role right now, but we are seeing that shift happening across industries. And I think as we move into kind of almost into Q2, scarily enough, now in 2021, and having gone through a really challenging last 12 months with COVID still going on, the big focus that people have put on customers, the investment that's gone into customer success has gone up a gear, massive gear. And this really needs to continue. And I think we have seen already starting this year, there's been a number of moves and new appointments for chief customer officers. And I think the other thing is that the chief customer officer role is quickly becoming a key driver in this digital transformation that businesses are going through, and also that's been accelerated through COVID and the pandemic.
Hmm.
I think a lot of businesses that aren't mature yet in customer success, or stuck looking at it being very reactive and kind of in the old way of doing it, if you want, and that's just being a barrier to change for them. They still have a CFO, they might have a chief sales officer, a CEO, but they just don't see why they need this new C-suite role yet. But it is changing, and I think the challenge is that people aren't seeing the value in it yet. They're not seeing the value in it versus what are they doing today. Why, if I've got a chief commercial officer, a chief revenue officer, where your customer success team does report sometimes, what else does this bring to it? So I think there's still a case to be made and still to help justify this for a lot of organizations. It needs to be about growth. It needs to be about growing the business and the size that we're at. And it's not just that we're bringing in another C-level role. I think you've got to really take a step back and to help organizations move away from the challenges they see with this. Some do struggle because it's another C-level role. There's an investment needed for this.
Right.
And I think if you if you view your chief customer officer as someone that's leading your customer success team, it's very difficult to justify the role. But if you view your chief customer officer as a chief collaboration officer that's breaking down those internal silos, focusing on the customer, focusing on getting that customer centric approach across the organization, then it's quite an easier case to make and easier to justify it.
Hmm.
I don't know, what would you say, Jason, are some of the goals and objectives for a chief customer officer? What are their responsibilities? And if they have a team, what would it look like?
Yeah, I think there's so much variation there as well too. But I really like the idea of the chief customer officer taking the outside in view. You've got internally, you've got your CRO and your sales folks and chief operating officer, really that inside out view. And I think you need someone who's going to say, really, what is it that our customers need? What's going to get us retaining these customers, and start from there and working backwards. And I think that's the perfect thing for a CCO to start to really do and say, are we closing this loop here where we need to go? So I think part of that comes with they're representing the voice of the customer in the business, and they're out there talking with the customers. They're bringing the feedback, the experience that everyone needs in every meeting. This can be a lonely position at times to do all that. And I think the CCO needs to be, obsessively customer centric and helping your business learn how to collaborate more effectively, which, it every business puts in place their own processes, their own way of doing things, and their own way of onboarding customers and servicing customers and things like that. And some organizations are just extremely rigid that they won't flex around that to meet the needs of the different customers. And I understand you need some structure to be able to scale and grow and deliver things effectively, but you do need to make sure that you are listening and being responsive. And I think that's something that the chief customer officer can bring and say, does this still make sense? Are we actually achieving our goals here? I think there's also that the CCO fills a leadership gap, bringing the customer voice and perspective directly to the board, hopefully, and they should be at the board level, because if the board is not obsessive about customers and their outcomes and their experience, they're definitely missing the trick here, because that's going to be the growth drivers we keep talking about. That's going to be where the revenue is coming from. They need to be on top of that, make sure they're doing the right things. So I think that's pretty critical all around there. What else would you add to that?
I think, there's some key things, and that kind of outside in view is a really key one to do. And I think, customer leadership is a really strong driver of a customer-led company culture. It's important to have that. The other thing I'd say is that the chief customer officer brings in what I'd call the third pillar alongside sales and operations. It brings
Mhm.
insight into what is happening in the so-called magic loop, the plan and build from product management and engineering versus demand and sales from marketing and sales.
Mhm.
And then you've got customer experience as customer success. So having that third pillar brings you a balance of power, which is super important. You've got ops looking internally, you've got sales focusing outwardly as far as closing the next sale. And having someone that can give a balance between them is really key. And I think the other thing it really does is it helps shift some of the focus. I don't want my sales team to have to worry about existing customers. I want my
Right.
sales teams to be looking at new biz, new opportunities, building up the pipeline. And by having this role and this exec level in there, it helps shift that and gives the more focus to those teams, which is really important to do. And I think you've also got to have someone that's kind of looking beyond just the balance of power as well, especially with a recurring revenue model where sales never end. And your CCO role really provides a strong signal into why we're doing this, and it sends a message out to our customers. And I think they do have a team, absolutely, and very often, it's not too dissimilar from what a VP of success would have. It's for me, it's all of the customer facing parts of the business. So it would be your customer success management function, your customer support function, training, renewals, and I would put renewals under your chief customer officer, and then professional services and implementation. So it's all of the customer facing parts of the business that look after customers once they've been going through the sales process. And I
Yeah.
think that's the really key thing.
And another thing that I think is different now, and we've already seen the shift of there's so much social information out there of testimonials, good and bad, people on Twitter, people on LinkedIn sharing good and bad experiences. And there's all the review sites, the G2 crowd and all these other things that if you are not delivering a superior customer experience, everyone's going to know about it pretty quickly. And people are going to hear that, and they're going to be a little bit more concerned. They're going to reach out to more people. I think gone are the days of just getting a reference from the customer. Your customers that have a great experience that you want to channel to. People now have a way of finding out for themselves where they are. And I know when I'm buying new software or services, I go right to reviews to understand what others' experience has been. And I think you've got to be on top of that. And up till now, I think people have hoped for the best, but now they're realizing this is a real, not just about retaining current client customers, it does impact your future sales and your future growth as well too.
I think that's such a key thing. It is. You've got to kind of understand what customers are saying about you and what the impact is.
Yeah. So Jason, we've talked about this some, and I think there's a lot of value to the company to have their chief customer officer. But what are the benefits to the customer if their vendor has a CCO, and how is it different if they have, if they have some vendors that don't have a CCO and some that do, or as they're looking at future vendors and wading through the prospects, what are the perks?
Right. See, that's that outside in view, isn't it? That's kind of looking the other way. Now, I think it's that there's a couple of benefits for us that I think really have an impact on your customers. One is around visibility. So it helps the business understand what is happening for your customers. And there's obvious benefits that from a customer. It also gives clarity as to what happens when a prospect in the sales cycle comes through to be a customer. And again, that has absolutely obvious benefits for your customers. That seamless transition from sales through to growth with your business through to the customer side of the business is a critical one to have. And as you said, that customer feedback is so important. We want our customers to feel and know that they've got a voice. When they say something, we're listening to what they're saying. I think it also gives clarity and really powerful messaging. They know that you're focused on their growth and their outcomes. And they've also got an exec who's there as a point of escalation, as a clear route of escalation for concerns and issues, and a dedicated customer-focused exec and team for all of that. I think it also means that customer experience, customer satisfaction are front and center for you and your customers, and that your customers know about this. And ultimately, to go back to the advocacy thing, your chief customer officer is the chief advocate for your customers, and it ensures that as a business, you're listening to your customers and that you're driving actions from what your customers are saying. And I think that is really critical. So a lot of benefits, both for us as a business, which then translate to benefits for a customer, but there are some specific ones for the customers.
Right. And I think those are all great too. And I think, one of the other things that occurs to me is if there's a vendor out there that has a CCO and they're this focused on customer experience and customer outcomes in particularly, I'll have more confidence that they are going to make sure that internally they're putting their right resources to making the outcomes better and to bringing the resources that I, as a customer, need to make sure I'm successful with their product in my organization. And I think if you don't have that role or that someone with the authority to do that and really responsible and looking for that, chances are they're not going to be providing as many resources for you or the right resources that you need to be successful as a customer. So I think it's very telling that you can have just that little more confidence that, okay, they're going to be on top of this.
I think that's a key thing, and it is knowing that someone's going to take ownership of it. It's owning that whole customer experience and delivery of the outcomes. Let me give the next question back to you then, Jason. So how does your chief customer officer work around or work across the business, and who do they report into, and how do they engage with your board?
I think it's so telling who they report into and the level of board engagement. It sends, not just gives them the credibility that they need, but it sends a very strong signal to your organization of how serious you are about customer, putting the customer first. I'd like to see the CCO report directly to the CEO, and I'd like to see them have board level responsibility where they're in there with the board issues, providing guidance and recommendation, talking about what needs to happen, talking about how this is going to impact the future of the organization if you do or don't do this. So I think that's absolutely key. And if you can start to have your CCO have, clear visibility and be prominent and have a CEO taking actions to support them, I think it's one of those things, I often say, I forgot who came up with this, but it was, we judge ourselves by our intentions, but we judge others by their actions. And I think if the action is the CEO is having the CCO report directly to them, if the CEO is front and center, showcasing the CCO and their work that they're doing, that goes a very long way to getting everyone else on board. And I think the CCO needs to be able to have the authority to, we want them to have this role to, bust silos and to get people aligned. They need to have some authority where they can call in across department teams and get things focused and moving. And you can still have sales people report to sales and product people report to the product folks, but you've got to be able to task them to work together collaboratively with other groups as well too. And I think the CCO needs to have some authority to make that happen as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think some really key points there, and I think it's a board level role. It should report into the CEO, absolutely. I think if it doesn't, it's difficult to kind of get the message that yes, we've got an exec responsible for the customers. And I think you need somebody that has that responsibility, so that your CEO needs to know who to go to talk about customers, which is a really important thing to do.
Yeah,
I think, go on.
I was just saying, and frankly, if the CEO does not want the CCO to report directly to them, that speaks volume about the quality of the CEO. If they try to duck them under the chief revenue officer or someone else, that's very telling.
Yeah. But I think it's the maturity of the business. At the right point, then this should happen. And it's not something that every business necessarily needs right away. You've got to be at the right level of growth. And I think what the other thing that they do is that the CCO really allows the board and the exec team to make sure that all of the department, the team goals, the objectives, even compensation are all focused around the customer. And that for me is the really key thing, that you work with all the teams to push that customer-centric goals and objectives across every part of the business.
Yeah, and I like that piece about making sure compensation is there. Something that goes a long way to the CCO really needing to make sure that motivations and rewards are aligned with the customer outcomes that you want. And I think that's an area where many times, especially I think in the sales area, there's still a lot of outdated business models where people haven't really kept up with, trying to incentivize and compensate for recurring revenue and customer outcomes. We talk about it, but I don't think we've quite gotten there yet. But Jason, just as a last question, because I think that really comes into then, should the CCO have revenue responsibilities, and if so, what would that look like?
Yeah, I think they do to an extent, and ultimately the metric you're looking at is net revenue retention. So looking at growth for existing customers, the health of the business through our customers, and then the related numbers through this. So you've got your expansion, your upsell, your customer opportunities from existing customers, growth from existing customers, but you've also got downgrades, cancellations, churn. So I think it's revenue, but as net revenue retention is the responsibility they need to have. That for me, I think, is super critical. And you're seeing more and more organizations bringing that metric in, and it's not just about a revenue number, it's about a net revenue number, which I think is the key thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they should definitely have revenue responsibility, and I think there'll be some transition periods if you're an organization bringing in a CCO for the first time. Hey, we're still not bringing in our ideal customer profile. We're still not selling to the right people. So there's going to be potentially some churn until they start to resolve those issues. But if I'm a CCO with a revenue goal and being compensated on this, I'm going to be pretty interested to make sure we're really targeting the right people and that we have people focused on the right stuff, making that case to the CEO and to the CRO, all those pieces. So I think that's absolutely key, because it's a business. Without having it tied to some sort of revenue piece, what are we doing?
Yep. I think it's great. It's revenue associated with your customers. That's the key thing. It's about, and if you're driving value for your customers, if you've got the right understanding of what their outcomes are, the focus is on lifetime value. It is a metric that makes perfect sense to own.
I agree.
Well, let me. That's the questions, guys. That's the kind of conversation. we hope you've enjoyed it, but let me give you a reminder kind of what our bold question was for the session. So what can you do to forge the need for a strong chief customer officer role in your organization in 2021? I will get my words out. So again, guys, thank you so much. We've really enjoyed this conversation. This is a topic that we have seen a lot of traction and growth on over the last 12, 24, 36 months. And I am confident we're going to see a lot more. So it's a really good one to get a good understanding of it. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do come back to us. Big thank you from me in the UK.
And thank you from me in Washington, D.C. Take care, everyone.
Okay, guys. Bye-bye.